Today we go to Latin America and the Caribbean to look at two big stories that may impact that region and perhaps the world for a long time to come. First, in Argentina, last Sunday, voters elected new members to the Colombian legislature, and the first round of the Colombian presidential election took place. And over in China, Colombia's President Gustavo Petro met with China's President Xi Jinping, and as a consequence, China has elevated diplomatic relations with Colombia to what it called a strategic partnership Wednesday that deepens, as Reuters put it, a push with one of the oldest U.S. allies for China to expand its influence and strengthen its foothold in the Latin American region. For more on that, we go to Esteli, Nicaragua, to speak with journalist Stephen Sefton. Stephen, thank you for joining us. Yes, we're going to look at two items this week. One is the Argentina election, the first round. Also, the president of Colombia is abroad.
The elections in Argentina took place last Sunday. They were both the presidential elections and elections for about half the legislature. Argentina has a two-chamber legislature, a Senate and a lower house, similar to the US Congress. And so about half of the seats in both the Senate and the lower house of the legislature in Argentina were being voted on. And also there were some votes for regional governments, for example, the very important government of the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina's capital. So what were the results? Well, the results were probably, as a lot of people will have seen, that to some people's surprise, the government party candidate, Sergio Massa, who's the government's Minister of the Economy, came first in the first round of these elections because he only got 36% of the vote. That's not enough to win on the first round. So he now has to go to a runoff with the second place candidate, this guy Javier Milei, the kind of maverick right-wing candidate whom many people have compared in US politics to Donald Trump and in Brazilian politics to Jair Bolsonaro. And so the results were something of a surprise given the primaries that had taken place not just a few weeks previously, in which Milei actually came out first in those primaries.
Right.
And so the government party, or the government coalition, of which Sergio Massa is a member, they had their work cut out to recover what people regarded as lost ground, what was perceived as lost ground as a result of the primaries. And the main loser in these elections was the previously dominant right-wing party, whose candidate, Patricia Bullrich, an extremely reactionary politician who was, I don't know what you call it in the United States, who would be the interior minister, the person responsible for internal security and so on. She held that post in the government of Mauricio Macri, and she was a very popular figure in Argentina's right wing. But she only came third, and that means that she's out of the presidential running. And also at a legislative level, the legislative elections were probably in some ways as important, or perhaps not quite as important, but they were certainly very important in terms of the governability of whoever ends up being president, whether it's Milei or Massa. And in that, in the legislative elections, the government party surprisingly did very well in the same way that Sergio Massa surprised people by coming first. He won with 36% of the vote, and Milei came in second with 30% of the vote. But in the legislative elections, the governing party, or the governing alliance, did really much better than people had thought, and they have strengthened their position in the Senate, and they also, although they lost 10 seats in the lower house, they still remain the biggest single party in the lower house, and the previously quite intimidating presence of the main right-wing party, they lost votes. They lost something like 20 seats in the legislature. although the governing party will be the biggest party in both the lower house and they have much stronger representation in the Senate, if Milei and the previously dominant right-wing party join forces, because Milei went from something like 3 deputies to 50. It's still not going to be an easy ride, supposing that Sergio Massa wins and then is faced with implementing his electoral program through the legislature, but it's better than it might have been. And so that's extremely positive news for the Argentinian government's point of view. But for looking at it from a regional point of view, and for my part, although I may be very rash on my part, I suspect that Sergio Massa will win the second round because the Javier Milei has shown in the course of the electoral campaign. He was shown to be extremely volatile and unreliable. And I don't know if you saw that interview that he did with Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
But he was so contradictory in that interview, and those contradictions have just got worse during the time he had to carry out his electoral campaign. His electoral appearances, his campaign rallies were extremely lackluster.
Yeah.
And so that's going to play in favour of Sergio Massa, and also what will play in favour of Sergio Massa is the fact that both Milei and the other right-wing candidate had threatened to pull Argentina out of its agreement to join the BRICS group in January, right, which would be an extremely negative outcome if it did come to pass for Argentina's economy, because it would just be shutting down very important options.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, this is sometimes when you're in politics and you find yourself captive by ideology, you do some really bad and really stupid things. And I think we're looking at an example of that. What we have only about 2 minutes left, so maybe we could take a quick look at the visit to China.
Well, in a way, that's linked to Argentina's decision or the current Argentinian government's decision to join BRICS, because it's becoming clearer and clearer as with every passing year, the future of integration depends on infrastructure investment, and that's not coming from anywhere else but China in terms of the region, on any worthwhile scale. And so Argentina joining BRICS, Petro going to China and saying that he regards Colombia's relationship with China as the beginning of a strategic alliance, and remember that Colombia has been one of the United States' closest allies for the last 50, 60 years, and so for Petro to go to China and say that this is the start of a strategic alliance with China is a very big deal in terms of the region.
Yes, it is. All right, Stephen, thank you for your time as usual, and we'll speak with you again next week. And keep your eyes open. Let us know what goes on down there.
Thank you very much, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.